Yes, sir.
About Social Security, a couple of questions. What is your position on the privatization of Social Security?
Sure.
And then the second question would be, what about this new initiative to sort of push back the age in which Social Security would be available?
Right. And that's a great question. We do have a major problem looming, obviously, with Social Security and Medicare. And one of the challenges of understanding these things for any of us is that if you actually look at what it would take right now to put Medicare plus Social Security, those two major entitlement programs, on a secure footing for the future, we'd actually have to put away $109 trillion. That's the so-called unfunded liability. We'd actually have to invest $109 trillion and invest at about 6% interest in order to assure that we would be able to pay the obligations to which we are now committed for the Americans who are here now. Needless to say, that's a figure that we just don't have sitting around. The entire gross domestic product is about $14 trillion. Our national debt right now is fast approaching that. In fact, the Congress, as you know, and Congressman Hall voted for it, has raised the debt ceiling to essentially very close to 100% of our gross domestic product. And that's just to pay for current obligations, basically. I mean, it's the budget deficit is enormous. So we have to think about how we're going to deal with this problem, because Social Security is running out of money. It's going to be bankrupt by 2016, something like that, depending on the figures. One of the reasons we've accelerated the date at which Social Security is going to be bankrupt is because this government is collecting less in tax revenues now, because the private economy is doing so poorly. And of course, Medicare is even closer to catastrophe because medical expenses keep rising. So we have enormous goals that we have to somehow try to meet. What I just alluded to with Social Security, bankrupt faster because our private economy is suffering. The first thing we need to do is grow the private economy, grow the private sector, so that we can afford to put our entitlement programs on which seniors rely on something resembling a secure footing. And the way to do that is to allow all of you who work, all of you who earn and invest to reap the benefits of those in greater measure. So we need not to raise your taxes. There are a lot of tax increases scheduled to start next year. We need to hold the line on the 01 and 03 tax cuts so that they remain in place. I think we should eliminate the estate tax, eliminate the alternative minimum tax, reduce your capital gains taxes, and not pursue the planned tax increases to cover the new health law. If we can grow our private economy, that will help, but it probably will not be enough. Paul Ryan is a congressman from Wisconsin. Has anybody heard of his Roadmap for America?
Ryan?
Yeah. Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan is I think he's a very astute gentleman. He is formerly of the staff years ago of our own Jack Kemp from New York. And he's written a plan. He's the only member of Congress who's actually undertaken a written plan that would make some sense for winding back some of the expenditures in Medicare and Social Security, and some of the ideas do include privatizing part of people's Social Security accounts. I think it's worth considering. I think it's a matter of, again, do we put a degree of trust in Americans to manage their savings? Because the real sad truth is that our young voters aren't going to realize probably any, unfortunately, what they put into Social Security. They're very, very little. When Social Security started out, there were 42 workers for every one beneficiary. That was, of course, back in the 30s. Now there are 2 to 3 workers for every beneficiary. So, we can't afford it, which is why people talk about changing the age at which you can collect benefits. We can't change the benefits for people who are getting them now and depend on them, but for people like me who have not yet received them, I think there are going to be some changes along those lines, and I think they are definitely concerned. Yes?
What is your thought on our border problem?
It's acute, and it does need to be resolved. And the federal government needs to, I think, one of the reasons we think so much about the Declaration of the Constitution this year is because we see our country in such peril. We see things not working. Look at the situation in Arizona. I mean, there is, the reason that Arizona wrote that law and passed that law is because they have a dreadful problem with crime, among other aspects, but they are seeking to control a crime rate. We are not securing our borders adequately with the fiscal resources, with the personnel, with the material needed to do that. And so the Arizona law is really a cry for help. But we go back, we see these crises happening, and we say, let's go back to the instruction manual, let's go back to the Constitution. What does it say about what the federal government should be doing? And one of the crucial roles of our federal government and enumerated power is to secure our national defense, to secure our borders, to provide that framework of liberty. I would like to see our federal government concentrate resources on border security, on our defense, and spend less time, or indeed not spend time, not get in the way in terms of interfering in the private economy. This Congress and this administration has spent a lot of time and a lot of resources, and I mean enormous amounts of your resources, your dollars, to try to wrest control of various aspects of our economy, major aspects of our economy, out of your hands, including healthcare, student loans, mortgages, the automobile industry, and now, of course, financial regulatory so-called reform, which is not going to be effective reform. We need to concentrate those resources instead on border security. If we had secure borders, we could transact, we could enhance our immigration programs, we could do a lot of things more effectively. We can't do it if we have porous borders. And that doesn't just include our southwestern border, of course, but all the borders and all the ports and our skies. And we do need to do that. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, we have about, I don't know, 12 million, 15 million illegal living here in the United States. And the federal government has not, their responsibility is to take care of the borders. It's a federal thing, not a state.
Right.
But they haven't done that. Now, there is going to be, I'm sure, the Democrats are going to try to get an immigration reform bill. Okay, what do you do with the 12 or 15 million people? Now, you can't send them all back, but what I think Congress can consider and should consider is, okay, if you're here, if you're not a felon, you can remain here, but you're on a different, like a worker's thing. They should not be given citizenship. The purpose of the Democrat Party is to get them citizenship, which means they're going to have 10 more million voters. So we go around about it, yes, we've got to resolve that, but they can't have citizenship, they cannot vote. And that is a very important issue. We had spoken to Luke English about that, and he perked up on that.
Yeah.
So, and don't forget, Congress has the purse strings. She doesn't give the money, that all, what it can't be in effect. So this is, I think, something that the future Congress people should consider, because there's a reason why they're doing this thing, and you gotta find the motive behind what's really doing. It's getting votes for the Democrat
Well,
Party.
you know, we have to make sure that we do the right thing constitutionally,
Yeah.
respect legal immigration. And of course, you know, I'm the daughter of a legal immigrant myself.
We all are in some ways,
Yeah.
yes. But
So-
no nation has permitted this to go through. And you have people who want to have cheap labor, and this does not help the people who are unemployed. And there's also political things, so one has to look at this very carefully.
Yep, it is a
Thing. But I wanted to mention this to
I
you,
appreciate that comment.
because that is another way of trying to resolve this.
Oh, thank you. Right. We must have some other questions here too.
Tort reform?
I'm strongly in favor of tort reform, and indeed another reason to elect someone from a different profession, other than lawyer, and I have many friends and beloved friends and colleagues and helpers in our our campaign were lawyers. But you know, lawyers like to write laws. And so we have a tort-friendly legal system, I would say, and a tort-friendly set of legislation. So I am in favor of tort reform. I think Philip Howard has a lot of great ideas through his Common Good organization, and he's written a couple of books with some pretty amusing titles, but he makes the point. You know, Life Without Lawyers is one of them. Not that I'm proposing that. But certainly, yes, the common sense tort reform that respects the fact that we're able to regulate our own behavior in ways that our state can entrust to us. And in terms of course, medical liability, we definitely need to have some common sense reform, and that can include specialty courts. It can include arbitration or mediation when people have followed certain guidelines, and limitation on non-economic damages. And I do intend to pursue that kind of change. I think it's very important.